Tell me about when you left Provencal, but that kind of begins it all,
When I left
huh?
Provencal, I left in the car with Carl and Johnnie. Carl Harris and my sister Johnnie. And because they lived in Baton Rouge, and I had made arrangements with my parents that I could leave home. I was just 16 years old. I hadn't turned 17 yet. It was going to be in September. I graduated the end of May. So Carl and Johnnie came to my graduation. And I had never owned a suit in my life. Didn't have a suit to graduate from high school in. So I was a skinny little fellow, you know. I weighed 125 pounds. And so Carl Harris loaned me, gave me one of his old suits, and I graduated from Provencal High School in his suit. Then I got in a car with them after graduation, having made such arrangements with my parents that I could go and would go to LSU. So I got in a car with them with a few clothes. I didn't have very many. A couple of pair of pants and 2 or 3 or 4 shirts. And so they took me to Baton Rouge. And I didn't go to their house and spend a night or anything like that. They drove straight to the LSU campus. I'd never been there. It was totally strange to me. And with me there by myself and didn't know a single soul at LSU. Nor had I heard of any of them going there. There were a couple of them that graduated from Provencal High School, had gone down there. They were older than me, but they weren't there anymore. They were enough older than me that they graduated. So they dropped me at the dairy barn, you see, where I was planning on, because Carl had told me that his uncle had made inquiries and that they needed help at the dairy barn. So I went there to milk cows for income and pay for my room, but they dropped me off there just before dusk. Well, no students. It was between semesters. Registration hadn't started for the next summer session. You see, most students don't come back and register for the summer anyway. So there wasn't anybody to talk to or anything. But there were a couple of guys that came in and milked cows. And I was able to ask them a question or two. At any rate, Carl introduced me to his mother's brother, who was a Mr. Rushing. And he was a security officer for the Louisiana State University. And one of his stops on the rounds that he made to keep the peace, so to speak, protect students, was at the dairy barn. Good place to turn around, good place to get a drink of water. So Carl had got a hold of him and knew how to find him, and he met us at the dairy barn there. We had a conversation because we'd just driven 3.5, 4 hours from Provencal.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how long a drive that was.
It's 175 miles.
Wow.
And you weren't going 60 miles an hour in those days, you know. You were more like 40.
Wow.
And so when we got there, we were tired, and you was just a little lonesome kid. And so Mr. Russian said to me, you can sleep in one of those rooms there. Just find a bed that's empty, and you can sleep in there. And in the morning, when you get up, you're going to see them guys come out here to milk cows. And about 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, Paul Henderson is going to come out here. He comes out every morning. Well, he's the he's a manager of the dairy, and so you talk to him and tell him what you plan to do, that you would like a job milking cows, and he'll tell you what to do from there on. So I did that the next morning and met Paul Henderson. Paul was a mild sort of guy, great big old slow-talking guy from over around Crowley someplace. Anyhow, he explained to me Well, he said we're between semesters now. The semester just ended, all the students going on, and I got just enough students left here that agreed to stay here and milk the cows every day. So you can, so he introduced me to one of the guys, L.P. Whittington. Littleton Pickett Whittington.
Wow,
I
what a
remember
name.
His name, L.P. was his, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I've never heard that name before.
And there was another guy there, a big man, and he had a bad eye too. His name was Cecil Branton. He got his doctorate later on when I was there at World War II, and became a part of the dairy department faculty, and something that I might have done if I had any sense in because they like me and they like my work.
Did the cows?
Oh yeah, well, the cows like me too. The arrangement for the cows was they each had a name and registration papers and things like that. Well, if students milked the cows, they didn't have to worry too much about that. That was Paul Henderson's job and the student manager. LP was the timekeeper for the guys over there, LP Whittington. That's why I mentioned him. So he explained to me the rules and told me where I could go to take a bath and all these kind of things. And said then registration would be in, it was about 4 or 5 days hence. In the meantime, I would come out, he told me, milk cows at milking time and get my hands where I could milk, because students were expected to acquire the ability to milk about 17 or 18 cows in 3 hours, and that was regarded as his work for the day, morning or evening. It had to be done twice a day. Milk the cows in the morning. The milking started in the morning at 4 a.m. So LP came around and woke everybody up that was supposed to be milking cows about 3:45. Then in the meantime, he had already got up about 3 o'clock and opened the doors to the barn and let the cows in. Each one of them knew exactly where to go. They had their own stanchion. Once in a while, they'd get in the wrong one, and they would back out and go back into it. Very interesting thing to observe. The cows I was used to out on the range in Provencal weren't that well tamed, you know.
It didn't sound like they have much of an opportunity either.
No, they were kind of like me, short of opportunities. So we had a stupid boy and some smart cows there.
So as opposed to smart boy and stupid cows up in Provencal.
Yeah.
It's all relative.
That was absolutely correct. You nailed it. So there were other things to be learned, and in the meantime, Artie was there in Baton Rouge, and
Your sister.
my other sister, Artie Barnado,
She was living in Baton Rouge at the time?
she lived in Jackson.
Okay.
She helped me out with some clothes, some pants and shirts. And she thought I was kind of undernourished looking. She's 125 pounds, so she brought me a bottle of thiamine chloride. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's vitamin B1. It was in a big wine bottle about this tall. She provided me with thiamine chloride in a cork stoppered bottle all the time I was at LSU. When I went in the military, I got where I could buy my own vitamin B1 pills, and so I bought them. And from then until this day, this morning, I took a multivitamin pill which includes some B1. So I took one virtually every day, even when I was in the Army. And
That's the secret.
I don't know what other vitamins came along and they discovered in the interim 75 years, but right now I use Centrum Silver, and that was only about 82 years ago that I went to that dairy barn, you see. It was 1942. It was exciting for me. I was very happy to get off that hill where there wasn't very much that was going to be more refined than killing grass with a hoe if I stayed there.
And all them dumb cows.
And literally, when I spoke to Dixie and told her that Papa wanted me to stay there because he hated for me to leave him with all that grass in his crop. Well, he had 30 acres that could be cultivated, but he didn't have enough boys and mules to cultivate all of it. I had to get off that hill. So her words to me, though, thank goodness for that. Ard, if you don't get off this hill right now, when you have a chance, you may wind up here the rest of your life. That wasn't a prospect I would look forward to. So I was glad to get down to LSU, and I felt very lost down there, but happy to be there. So I was on my own, beginning with that about June 3rd or 4th of 1942. I went on my own. I earned my own money, paid my own way. From then on, the rest of my life. I had some grand experiences at LSU, some of which were germane to subsequent time, my military and so forth. So I want to say, I found out that that guy that handed me that card, Company A, infantry only, little white 3x5, he had recruited me into his infantry unit at the Louisiana State University in the Reserve Officer Training Corps program, which was mandatory at the time for all male students. And it had always had been mandatory. It was a military institute before it became Louisiana State University. And it was located, of all places, in Pineville, Louisiana, where my parents lived.
I think they moved there in 1916, didn't they? Or something like that?
Around 1916, they came down from Washington Parish.
Right.
And World War II took place in 1918, 19.
Well, World War One, yeah.
World War One. That's correct.
And then they left there in 1923 before you were born.
They did, that's correct. Yeah,
I recall those things. But yeah, that's interesting that, having spent time as a family in Pineville where the Louisiana Seminary had gotten started.
I didn't really know that. And what that was when Sherman
Right.
was president of. So I registered and found out I was in the infantry in Company A infantry, and I didn't know what in the hell Company A infantry meant. I didn't know I was in a military unit. It was on my.
What month was it? This was as soon as you got there, or like June. A couple of days?
About a week later, we registered for the summer school. And that year, LSU, because of the war program, they had split the summer session into 2 6-week sessions.
Okay.
And you could take up to 9 hours in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That was the maximum you could enroll for. And so I enrolled for 6 or 7, I forgot what it was. One was physical education. 2-hour course was military science. It was written on my card showing my schedule, but I didn't know what that card was for. So I had to ask another student, my roommate, the people that were in there. Well, there were no new ones in there, and all these old LP and the people that had been there, and he was going to graduate in a year, they weren't interested in tutoring a green freshman that didn't know. They were kind, but they were busy people. I mean,
You were more dumbed in the cow, so.
I'll tell you what. That was an interesting time for me. Well, at any rate, I had to show up, so I got to go into those classes. And when I'd gone in there to register, this is doggone funny. I went in and C.W. Morningbag, who had given me that card to the infantry, says, you go in there and somebody will, you can go up to a table where they don't have a line, and somebody will take care of you and tell you what to do from there. And so sure enough, there was an old white-headed man who did this, and I walked over to him and sat down in a chair, and he said, well, let's see, and he started the registration. And he said, well, let's see, I see you made a B in geometry, a B in algebra. Let's see, you're a good math student. I'll tell you what I'll do with you. I'll put you in advanced college algebra. Do you know how much algebra I had had? When I was a sophomore in high school, remember I graduated at 16.
I got you.
But when I was in the 9th grade, I took one year of algebra. That's all I had. And it was not very much. I want to tell you. Even though it was taught by a smart guy, the principal, who was Arthur Kyle, and a good friend. When I went to class and found out that I was in advanced college algebra, they started off with about 2 years more algebra than I had ever had. Do you know who the professor was in that class? The old white-headed man.
I'll be damned.
I've forgotten his name, but he just filled his class with what he thought was good students based on their
I see.
grades. And
He was picking his own crop.
that's correct. And so I found that out, and by the time I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and milk cows until about 7, because it took 3 and 3.5, and when you first start off, it takes you more than that. The first time they turn you loose to milk them 17 cows, it's going to take you about 4 hours.
But it sounds like what you're describing there is a bit of an algebra problem right there.
Oh!
How many cows can you do in 3 hours? Is it 17 or 15?
I got
What are the variables in that?
But I milked as many as 20 cows. And I was one of their best milkers. And it took me about a week to get so I could milk 17 cows. Mm-hmm. And it did take me about 4 hours to do it because my hands were somewhat tired until about the end of the first week. By that time, they had toughened up. And you still get tired from milking cows for 3 hours. I guarantee you your hands get tired, especially if they're giving an average of 2.5 gallons, which is 20 pounds of milk from each cow.
Man, you just can't get away from algebra.
I'll tell you what.
How many buckets, how fast?
I didn't tell you all the story about that, but I want to make that algebra story. I want to finish it in a hurry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because
do that.
I flunked it. I want to tell you, I learned in about, because we had classes, I believe it was 5 days a week. Well, so every morning I was milking cows all the time, morning and evening. And those guys are, because they want you to get where you can pull your part of the shift quick, you see. And I needed to be doing it when they helped me, so I did. So I had two things going, but that class with algebra, I found out, And by the way, we had armchairs. You know what an armchair is? You
Sure.
put your books under, and you got a desk up here like this. And so after about a week, I realized that I was going to get nowhere. I was going to get nowhere because I didn't have the foundation. And he would come into the professor would come into the class. He would write on the board whatever the lesson was, and he'd put a problem up there. And he says, "Everybody got that?" And he'd grab his eraser if nobody said no, and he'd erase it. I didn't say no because I wasn't going to get it, but I was so tired and sleepy from milking cows, getting up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, that I just put my head on that chair and went to sleep. When the class was over, somebody would wake me up, and I'd look down at the arm on that chair, and there would be a saliva where it had dripped out of my mouth, and I'd taken a nap.
So you
That means that I had a 3-hour course in English. I had made a C in English, a 3-hour course. And I had made an F in algebra, and I had a 1-hour course, a 2-hour course in military science, and a 1-hour course in physical ed. I made a C in physical ed. I made a C or a B in military science. I had not learned to study when I started at LSU.
Yeah.
And I did not learn how to study until I was in graduate school. Because learning was easy for me. I wasn't dumb. I just was ignorant. I didn't know anything. And didn't even know how to study. Because I didn't take a book home from Provencal Hall. I could do the homework that the other students could do before the final bell rang, put it in under my chair, and finish it before the teacher came in the next morning. That's how light the workload was in a little 11 grade country high school, which had only graduated 15 students out of the 7th grade. Then they had a couple more little elementary schools who sent their students to merge them with us, some of them at the 8th grade level, one elementary school that had 7 grades, and that was Val Mill, sent their students by bus to Provencal, and that increased our enrollment a little. Then Bellwood, which had 9 grades, sent students when they reached the 10th grade. And so we graduated 26 students in my graduating class. In 1942, there were 13 boys and 13 girls. And
So you weren't exposed to real challenging work in high school.
No, I was not. And my dad needed me, and I was the oldest one in home.
Right.
From the time I was 11 years old. He didn't have an older son there most of the time. Frank stayed there a year or two and made a crop and worked and cooked breakfast before he went to the field to work, because I was 11 years old. Ruth was 9 years old, and Royce was 5 years younger than me, you see. 6 years old when, so I had a heavy workload of responsibility there because my dad had arthritis and was getting to be old, you see. And I had heavy responsibilities. I was able to get it done and get it done in a hurry. At home, I was a good worker, and at school I was the same way. I made a good reputation with the teachers at Provencal High School when I was in the second grade, and it remained until I graduated, and they were delighted with me because I was going to go to LSU. I had gotten that determination, or at least expressed that wish to my parents, and Johnnie and Carl were encouraging me. And
it sounded like you had a number of parents.
I did. My older brothers and sisters, when I was born, there had not been a baby in the family because the three little brothers that died, one of them was older than Pauline, and I believe two of them were younger. Pauline was 7 years older than me. So the next youngest baby when I was born was 7 years old in the house. So all my older brothers and sisters spoiled the fatal hell out of me. They ruined me.
Yeah, you came out pretty bad, I'll tell you what. It's awful what they did to you.
And they loved me. and my mother was ill from the time I was born, because I do not know why, but she went to the hospital and was ill a great deal, and I didn't know whether my mother, by the time I was a year old, was Johnnie or Minnie, to tell you the truth. I did know Mama was Mama, and I missed her a lot, but I want to tell you I love Johnnie because Johnnie was 16 years old and took care of me virtually everything for my mother during that first year.
So back to your LSU summer, your first June, July, you had about a 6-week schooling.
Yeah, well, the second half of the summer I had 6 more weeks, and I was registered, as you can imagine, on probation because I had flunked algebra.
Yeah.
Well, I hadn't passed enough hours not to be off probation, see? So my second 6 weeks at LSU, I was on probation.